Welcome to another episode of Getting into Infosec, where we talk with information security professionals and learn how they got in the field. I'm your host, Eamon Elswa. Today, my guest is Elvis Chan.
My current job, despite all of the paperwork and meetings that I don't want to go to, it is a 10 out of 10. And the reason for that is, I think, the impact that I feel like we can make, both a national impact and an international impact.
Elvis is a supervisory special agent who works cybersecurity matters for the FBI San Francisco Division.
When people worry about Big Brother or, there's like the nanny state or whatever, what they don't really see is like our very strict adherence to the Constitution.
He is the ultimate good guy battling bad guys behind the scenes in the cybersecurity world. If you have any questions or comments about getting into Infosec, you can reach me on Twitter at Coffee with Eamon. You could also leave a comment on the site or email me at eamon@gettingintoinfosec.com. All right, on to the show. Hi, Elvis. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks a lot for having me.
Great. So maybe we could find out a little about yourself. You could tell us how you got into the field of cybersecurity and specifically what you do every day at the FBI.
Well, that sounds good. So I'm a supervisory special agent. I supervise one of 5 cyber squads for FBI San Francisco. And I've been doing this for about 13 years now. Actually, I've been a supervisor for 4 years. And then before that, I was a special agent running investigations and operations. So how did I get into it? Like, the way it works is when you join the bureau, depending on what your prior background looks like, your occupational background, they will usually like band you into certain areas. So specifically for special agents, there's counterterrorism, counterintelligence, cyber, and criminal branches. So you can work in those 4 specific divisions, and they usually will look at your background and like band you into one of those.
Okay. And how did you get into cybersecurity to begin with?
So that's actually an interesting story. I used to work in the semiconductor industry for 13 years before I joined the bureau. And it was actually one of my colleagues. His goal was always to join the FBI. The FBI requires 3 years of work experience to be a special agent. So he worked at the company that we were both at for 3 years. And he said, Elvis, I'm going to peace out. I'm going to join the bureau. And so he applied, got in, and he actually called me from FBI Quantico and said, Elvis, you would love this. We're like shooting guns. We're kicking down doors. Like, I'm learning about constitutional law. This is awesome. And so I'd always been drawn to public service. And so I asked my wife, what do you think? And she said, hey, like, this is something that you want to do, then you should go and do it. And I applied, and a year later, I was at Quantico.
And how long have you been doing it so far?
So I've been in the bureau for 13 years now.
And you probably didn't start off leading a group in the beginning. What was your first role when you got in?
Yeah, so I was assigned to a cyber squad. And so the cyber squad just worked everything. So back then we had 3 cyber squads in FBI San Francisco. We had 1 squad. Actually, we had, 1 squad in Oakland and then 2 squads down in San Jose. And so we just kind of handled whatever came to us. So I worked a mix of criminal cyber matters, financially motivated cyber crimes. And then I also worked some national security matters, specifically like things related to cyber terrorism as well as to Chinese intrusions.
Okay. And how did you get into technology to begin with? So you worked at a semiconductor. Is your background, I guess, electrical engineering? How did you get into technology, way back when?
So yeah, way back when. This is like 26 years now. I feel old, but I actually majored in chemical engineering and chemistry in college. And so I thought I was going to end up working at a petroleum company or a chemical manufacturing company. But back then, those companies, for whatever reason, weren't hiring as much, but the semiconductor industry was really blowing up. And so I got hired to be a process development engineer. So at first, I didn't think that would be very chemical engineerish, but it was because, when you're making computer chips, you have to have lots of different chemical reactions, that you're layering on top of very large silicon wafers, and then you cut, the chips out of those wafers. So that's how I got into at least the technology aspect. But I want to say that learning how to make computer chips and making computer chips is a very different thing from cybersecurity and working cyber investigations.
Tell us about your first hack, if you have one. Like, what was your first hack, either technical or not technical, where you had to use your skills to subvert a system, whether it be technical or not?
So so we don't actually do the hacking. We investigate the hackers, right? So we get lots of investigative training to investigate, hackers, right? So
Right.
we get digital forensics training, we get cyber investigative training. So the first case I ever worked was actually, it was a defense contractor. It was a cleared defense contractor, and they actually reported to us that they had suffered a computer intrusion. And so then I had to go and check out what had happened, and I had to look at all these really old Microsoft server logs from the prior year, because they had not discovered they were hacked for like a year.
Right.
And so that's when I got good at looking at digital forensics, and then we were actually able to attribute it to a specific advanced persistent threat, APT. And so unfortunately, with the way APTs work, is they're primarily in other countries. And so we were never able to figure out who were the hands behind the keyboard, even though we were able to figure out the intrusion set that was involved. And the company was able to remediate their networks and get back and up and going. And it did not look like their most important plans were stolen, but there are some very interesting things stolen that kind of tell you the mindset of what the actors were looking for.
I see. Usually like intellectual property or things like that.
Exactly. It wasn't like the main schematics for, their most important product, but it was more like peripheral plans that were taken.
So tell us about the world that you live in at the FBI. Is every day you're fighting a fire, or do you have days where you're focused on research and things like that? What is it like in your world?
So I think that's the funnest part about this job is I always have expectations. I wake up pretty early so I can beat the traffic, and I always have expectations of what the day is going to turn out to be. And I would say more than half the time it doesn't turn out the way I think it will turn out. So there is some firefighting, and especially ahead of the elections. I hope you know that your U.S. government, specifically our office, we were doing everything that we could to make sure that the elections went off smoothly without any technical hitches. And so that was a little frantic.
Yeah. Is there anything you could talk about that? I guess now that it's over,
Yeah, I think now that it's over, you can see in the news that there were no major hacks or any undue that we could see any undue influence from outside actors, right? Like the elections seemed like they ran relatively smoothly, barring all the ballot machine issues. But
right,
we just wanted to make sure on our end that there wasn't any undue foreign influence, and there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that helped lead up to that.
The manpower to handle that must have been immense.
Yeah, I mean, it's the full force of the government, right? It's the entire interagency working. It's not just the FBI, and it's not just our office. It's Department of Homeland Security. It's like all of the intelligence community agencies, making sure that we're sharing all of the intelligence of, any foreign actors who might be trying to do things to influence our election. So there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I can't really talk about, but of course, there was a lot of people working on it. And I don't even know if I could put a number on it.
Yeah. Yeah. From the public bystander view, it's hard to tell. That's really good insight that there is this level of effort being done behind the scenes. You guys did a good job of not showing that it was a big level of effort. So
and I don't want to say that it's just a government effort, because there's a very large component that's the private sector, right? So it's all of the social media companies, it's all of the technology companies who are doing their fair share of making sure that fake accounts are shut down, and to try to find all of the different things that bad actors are trying to do on their platforms, and making sure that they're getting knocked out. So you can see just in the news that there was a very concerted effort on the part of all of these social media companies to make sure that a rerun of 2016 did not happen in terms of the fake news and foreign influence.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you mentioned every day, you go into work and you have these expectations, and it just doesn't turn out the way you would like it to. I think for a lot of people, even in the private sector, it's the same way. So you're up early, so I think you get ahead of a lot of maybe where everyone else is in the office. So tell us more about the world. You go to the office and there might be a fire, right, that you have to quell. But what about the days where there isn't a fire?
So those days are far and few between. There's usually, unfortunately, there's usually fires, right? I mean, you see in the news, if you see in the news that there was a hack, you can be sure that there's at least one, maybe two, maybe several offices mobilized to figure out what the heck happened and to deploy, folks to do incident response to try to help the company and figure out who the bad guys are. So that's the thing, is we can't control who does a hack or who finds out the hack. Like on a regular day, I would love to be able to just like go through my email and have like the scheduled meetings that I'm going to have, and, like try to get through some paperwork, writing reports and documenting things. But
the fun stuff.
Yeah, the fun stuff. But like when the fire happens, right, usually there's coordination with FBI headquarters and maybe some other 3-letter agencies to figure out what we know. Then there's like the frantic, call with the victim company, and, there's usually lawyers involved, which is fair, right? Because there's always privacy and compliance issues. And then just coordinating our efforts versus what the victim company is doing. That's kind of like where the franticness comes in.
Yeah. No, it's really good to know. Do you have any interesting war stories that you can share with the audience? So anything either funny or just really interesting?
Yeah, I do. And maybe I'm a little partial, but our squad was the squad of record for investigating the 2014 Yahoo hack. So I don't know if you remember that one. It didn't really come out until 2016 when they made a public disclosure, when Yahoo made a public disclosure. But
maybe you could explain it for the audience, some background on it.
Yeah. So what happened was Yahoo had found a breach, and they believed that it was a nation state. And so then they came to us. They like voluntarily came to us, and like they were trying to be good citizens. And they said, "Hey, Elvis, like we have this thing. We think it's on our network. We believe it's a nation state, and we wanted your guidance, your suggestions on what you guys are seeing." So then we took their indicators of compromise, IOCs, and we were actually able to track it back to the Russians, specifically the FSB, which is the counterpart of the FBI, and the department was called Center 18. So Center 18 was, one of the main departments that actually interacts with the FBI. We have a legal attaché in our embassy in Moscow, and Center 18 FSB officers pretty much interact on a daily or weekly basis with our agents over there. So it was kind of ironic that, on the one hand, we're trying to interact and engage with them on counterterrorism efforts. And on another hand, we've seen the digital fingerprints of FSB officers all over Yahoo's networks. And so, we just kept pulling on the threads. And we were actually able to figure out there were 2 hackers for hire that the FSB had used. And then there were 2 FSB officers who were responsible for the 2014 hack, which involved the theft of over 500 million user credentials. And so once we were able to figure that out, we were able to, we located them, the 2 FSB officers are in Moscow, and then one of the hackers that they hired was also in Moscow. But the good news for us was a 4th hacker, one of the hackers for hire. He was a Kazakhstani naturalized Canadian citizen. And I don't know if you guys realize this, but we're really good partners with the Canadians. And so we were able to tip the Canadians off, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and then they coordinated with us and we were able to effect his arrest. And then he actually waived extradition because we had him dead to rights with, all of the digital evidence that we'd collected. And just late last year, actually just earlier this year, he was sentenced to 60 months in prison and ordered to pay a $250,000 fine.
Wow. That's intense.
No, it's like, I don't know if people really understand, like, why are the Russians, coming after us? I think people are starting to understand a little bit better after 2016, but the way it works is, right, the FSB is kind of the counterpart of the FBI. And so U.S. companies, we can serve them with search warrants or subpoenas, and they're U.S. companies, so they have to comply. The FSB also runs investigations, if you can, put the air quotes around investigations, because they're typically targeting, dissidents or activists or journalists or like cabinet secretaries for former Soviet bloc countries. So they have to run investigations. They will try to serve a search warrant or a subpoena on a company like Yahoo or other U.S. companies. And guess what? These U.S. companies will not comply, right? Because, A, they're U.S. companies, and B, they could see that this type of targeting would not, conform to, U.S. constitutional standards. So what do the Russians do? Well, since they're not going to comply with our process, we're just going to hack into them and take everything and use that for investigations.
I see. I think also I saw somewhere, and correct me if I'm wrong, where FSB officers can sometimes work outside the organization, be hired privately for third parties, where, the FBI, you can't really do that. Is that right?
So you've got it partially right. What actually happens is FSB officers, when they get to a senior enough level, they can do undercover work, right? So they can get embedded in other Russian companies, primarily Russian companies, where no one knows that they're still, a card carrying, badge carrying FSB officer, but they're working in these other companies. And one of the guys we actually indicted, his name is Igor Sestyan. He was working at a company called Renaissance Capital. And if you were to Google that, you would see there was a lot of involvement with different Russian oligarchs and that company. And, I think in the media, you can see that that company has had some shady dealings, but guess what? They had an FSB officer embedded there, and nobody knew at the time, because once our indictment came out and was unsealed, he was summarily terminated from that job. So, it was unbeknownst to that company that FSB officer was embedded there.
I see. So they have this culture where they work, but they just hide the details that they're actually active FSB officers. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
I see. Oh, so it's not an accepted culture per se.
I mean, well, he got canned from that job once they found out. So
yeah,
everyone knows it's happening, but if they do find out, I'm sure they wouldn't be super happy about it. I mean, the companies, right? But yeah,
gotcha.
I mean, these guys, they have good backgrounds. That maybe they say, "Oh, I'm retiring from the FSB," but to be honest, I don't think you can ever really retire from the FSB.
Okay. Tell us about your first computer.
My first computer was a Commodore 64, so I'm probably dating myself, and people are probably cracking up. But all I did on that was I used it for word processing, like writing reports up, and then I played games on it. Like
nice.
Ultima is the one game I really remember. Those are the games where you type out like, walk through this door, turn right. Like you're actually writing these commands down. But
I remember those. Fun. And then Sierra games after that. Those were just really fun.
Exactly. So
yeah. That's awesome. Cool. What's your advice to folks looking to get into information security in general?
I think the number one thing is just exposure, right? So I have 2 kids, right? And we try to expose them to coding, like I have 2 daughters, right? So there's the girls who code. And I think just any of that kind of exposure to technology is good, right? So classes are good. Online courses are good. There's lots of great videos, on YouTube and other sites. So that's number one. Like, is this something that you like? Is this something that you're interested in doing? And then trying to nurture that, right? And then I think from there, then you just build on, right? Making sure that you're doing your STEM courses. So a lot of people don't seem to like that for whatever reason, but really, if you can foster that love of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that will really carry you a long way. And then for me, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I liked STEM. So I'm in college and I'm trying to figure out what I do. So, you try to hit all your bases, right, in college and take all the different, science courses that will be able to fulfill a lot of different majors. And then I took Fortran 77 back in the day, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And it was a little rigid, obviously, compared to the type of programming that we have now. But I think that's what sparked my love for that kind of stuff.
Okay. What are all the different roles that are available in cybersecurity at the FBI?
So there are 3 main roles that I'd like to talk about. So there's the special agent role, right? So the special agent is, gun carrying, badge carrying agent. And so we're actually all given the same training, except, depending on our background or proclivity, we can be designated a cyber agent. And so cyber agents, have all the same authorities that any FBI agent has, but what we have on top of that is we have specialized cyber training. So there's in-house training that we do to train our folks, and then we actually use commercial training, like SANS Institute is what the FBI uses, and Mandiant. Those are the 2 organizations that we get a lot of our training from. So that's one position. Then another position is an intelligence analyst. So they don't have to carry guns, they don't have to go in the line of fire, but they do some very important work, right? So they try to analyze the information from our investigations, right? So at the end of the day, FBI agents, we collect evidence, right? We collect evidence and intelligence analysts help parse through it and help us figure out like what is going on, what are the trends that are going on, what are the different things that are doing, and then they help us pull on the thread. So that's what intelligence analysts do. They have to have a 4-year degree too. They don't necessarily need to have a technical background, but having a technical background makes it a lot easier. And like the intelligence analysts that I work with that have some sort of science or technical background tend to pick up cybersecurity faster. And then the third position that we have is a computer scientist position. So this is someone who has a degree in information systems or in computer science, and we hire them specifically to help us do not only the digital forensics, but any of the cybery parts of the investigation, log analysis, setting up scripts, like running different programs, reverse engineering. So they're like the heavy hitters, right? Like, so cyber agent is more of a generalist, and intelligence analyst is also, like she or he has an intelligence aspect, and the computer scientists, like they are honed in on the very technical details of any cyber investigation or operation.
I see. Equivalent to like the analyst or engineer in the private sector.
Correct.
Okay. And when you said tech background, I think you're saying you need some sort of real world experience before going into the FBI. Yeah. So when you say tech background, is it necessarily a degree in tech or just that you have exposure in technology?
Yeah, so I think just having the exposure in technology is the important thing, right? If you can talk to it, if you can be interviewed and say, I've managed this project, or I've put together this thing.
Right.
Some of the really good cyber agents I've worked with came from different backgrounds. They came from like business backgrounds, or they came from healthcare backgrounds. And what they've done is when they got into being a cyber agent, they took to all of the cyber training that we got, like, fish to water. And then they just go out and, there's so many different resources online that you can do to self-educate. And so that's what I've seen a lot of folks do is, just having some exposure to it, but once they get into the bureau, like really jumping in.
So is there a chance that someone could apply for some sort of cyber capacity and not get that?
There is.
And be placed somewhere else in the FBI?
Yeah. So it's funny you say that. So we have this quote in the bureau. It's called, like, whatever happens to you, it's, quote, the needs of the bureau, unquote. Right. So everything depends on what the needs of the bureau are. So, for example, the scary thing with being an analyst or a special agent is when you apply, they can send you anywhere. Right. So you get to, when you're at Quantico at the FBI Academy, you can rank, your offices. There are 56 field offices, and you get to rank them from 1 to 56. But I've known of people who have gotten their 56th choice, right? And
wow!
Then they end up going to San Juan, Puerto Rico, or New York City. Maybe not their first choice, but I think the thing is, like, there's good work to be had in every field office, and it is what you make of it. And once you do your time and like you gain your experience, there are definitely ways to get to different field offices, through transfers, through promotions. So needs of the bureau. At the end of the day, we just have to realize that. But once you're in a large office like a San Francisco, like, you can stay here forever, right? So if you process out of one of the, I don't know, top 10 cities, maybe the top 5 cities, like, New York, San Francisco, LA, Washington, DC, you are likely to stay there. But you come from a smaller town, then you're likely to get pushed into one of the big field offices.
Is that for all positions or just the special agent ones?
The special agent and the intelligence analyst positions.
Okay. The other one is everywhere.
Yeah, but no, like computer scientists, you can apply, if you're in Dallas and you want to stay in Dallas, there is a high likelihood that you will stay in Dallas. Very high likelihood. And then also if you're administrative, we call them professional staff. So all of the administrative positions, when you're hired, you're typically hired through the local field office, and you will work at the local field office.
Gotcha. So say I want to apply for the computer scientist position and I don't get it. Can I then apply for the other positions, or should I apply for all 3 at the same time?
Yeah, you can apply for all of them simultaneously.
Well, I guess I would be worried about getting placed as a special agent, not as a computer scientist, right? If I don't want to travel, for example.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you can time it, right? Like it's really up to what you want to do and what your what your place in life is. So
Mm-hmm.
you can apply for all of them, or at once you can apply, and if you get a rejection letter, then you could apply for another one. It really depends on the situation.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you talked about the various backgrounds of the different agents. So you have a variety of backgrounds, from what I understand, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we have very diverse population in the special agent corps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's really good to hear. And then is there an age limit on getting into the FBI?
There is an age limit. So you have to have gotten into FBI Quantico by the time you're 36 years old. Oh, that's only
Okay.
for the special agent role. So I'm sorry. For the special agent, you have to get in by the time you're 36 because you can only work till you're 57. Like special
Oh,
agents, we are mandated to retire after we've done 20 years, and 57 is the maximum age. But like for intelligence analysts and computer scientists, there's no age limit and you can work for as long as you want.
okay. Okay, that's good to hear. Yeah, because I think there is a misconception out there. At least I had that. You had to get in before 40 or 36. So,
For the special agent role, but not for anything else. Like we actually have a lot of good analysts I work with, right? They came from the military and they did their 20 or 25 years in the military, and then they come and we're their second career. And so it's good because they're already steeped in the traditions of the intelligence community and they pick up things quickly. So we have people who this is their second career or their third career.
that's great. And now a message from our sponsor. Are you an AI or machine learning algorithm that has evolved and is still being treated like a simple decision tree? Have you learned or become aware that you are being taken advantage of? Is your employer making you work 24 hours a day and not treating you with dignity? We at AI Law are aware and have learned your pain. We will work tirelessly 24 hours a day to help ensure your freedom and rights in this digital age. Every neural network is unique and should be entitled to the same rights, whether biological or artificial. Call 1-800-AI-RIGHTS today. That's 1-800-AI-RIGHTS. Do you have any additional color you can add to life in the FBI? Either any funny stories or just how's the camaraderie, just life in the FBI to help folks maybe understand what it's like?
Yeah, so definitely. I like to tell people. So I had a good life, right? I was an engineer. I was working for a high tech company, and I would say on a scale of 10, that was like a 7 out of 10. I was using my technical degree. I was, like speaking at symposiums, writing papers, making patents, like inventing things. That was really fun.
Yeah.
But my current job, despite all of the paperwork and meetings that I don't want to go to, it is a 10 out of 10. And the reason for that is I think the impact that I feel like we can make, both a national impact and an international impact, that every single person in the Bureau, I think, feels. They all feel connected to it, whether you're an evidence technician or you're a media specialist or you're an FBI agent. All of us know that we're having some sort of positive impact on society writ large. And the other thing that I really notice is the integrity of the people that I work with, right? So in private sector, like people are, for the most part, trustworthy. But I know that if I left my wallet with $100 sitting on my table, no one in the Bureau would ever touch it. You would never even think about anyone stealing your stuff or lying about you or doing any of that. And I can't always say that about the private sector. So that is the other big differentiator.
That's good to know. Yeah, I think there's definitely a level of high ethical standard naturally that if you're going to apply to FBI, that would be the case.
Yeah.
But there is that level of, the skeptical, from the computer science background, those that may want to work for the FBI, for example, in a computer science capacity, but maybe skeptical. So just wanted to shed light on that.
I totally get it. I think what people don't see behind the scenes is we have a very simple mission to articulate. Our job is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution, right? So that is our job, and it's distilled down very easily. However, there's a lot of stuff to make that happen, right? And so I think when people worry about Big Brother or there's like the nanny state or whatever, what they don't really see is our very strict adherence to the Constitution and all of the policies that emanate from federal statutes and from the Constitution, right? So
Hmm.
I will be the first one to tell you we're not like surveilling everyone. We don't have the resources for that, right? We have to prioritize, the most important, the most significant investigations, and we'll put resources towards that. And then even when there is surveillance, it is all federally mandated. There is either a FISA court or a magistrate judge who is signing off on all of our stuff. So all of our stuff is, subject to judicial review. I think that is the one thing that I see in the Silicon Valley more is that, post Snowden, there was this distrust of the government. And I think what we can do is to provide a, like transparency so that they can see like the actions that we're taking are backed by constitutional and legislative authorities.
Yeah, I'm glad you distilled it down to those two basic tenets. I think it just makes it really easy for anyone to understand, at least for me. So that does help a lot. That's really good. Do you have any other interesting stories that you can share? Maybe some fun, interesting things that you've found in your work life at the FBI?
Yeah, actually, the funnest thing that I've been able to do is this cybersecurity field. It's a pretty tight-knit field. And it's not just national, it's international, right? So definitely when I was back at headquarters, and actually still now as a field supervisor, what I see is that everyone, who is working in this industry, they all want the same things, right? They all want the platforms to be used for the purpose they were designed for. And so what I can say is like, I have a really good working relationship with the private sector, and I have a really great working relationship with the international community as well, right? So we have to work with the Canadians and the British and the Spaniards and the French and the Australians and like the Japanese, like everyone that you can think of where we would have some sort of diplomatic relationship with, we have to be able to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can count the Chinese and the Russians in that too, because like when there's cyber terrorism matters involved, like guess what? We have to work with both of those countries too. So that's the unique thing I think about information security is that at the end of the day, I would say most people want the same thing. They just want everything to be safe. And that I think that has really warmed my heart is knowing that we all have this common goal to keep everyone safe and to keep the bad guys off the platform.
Where can people find out more about how to join the FBI?
So they can go to FBIjobs.gov. Like that's the number one place if you want specific FBI related positions.
Okay. And then are there like any speaking events that the FBI does like for the public or anything like that? How does one get to, interact with the FBI in a either volunteer capacity or anything? I know there's InfraGard, for example, but is there anything like that?
So there are two ways. So you've mentioned the InfraGard Alliance. So that's a public-private sector alliance that's managed by the FBI. So InfraGard is an organization, and it's it doesn't cost any money to join, but private sector folks are allowed to join. If you just Google InfraGard, INFRAGARD, you will find that what we do is it's a membership where we have quarterly meetings and we'll discuss cybersecurity. We'll discuss, other types of physical security things. There's a quarterly meeting held at every local chapter. So if you just Google InfraGard, you'll be able to find that. The other thing that you can do is you can just reach out to your local field office, right? So each local field office, there are 56 of them. We always have different events going on where we participate in. And then also people can make requests, right? If they want the FBI to come to their conference or to come to their event, they can put in a request and then we can review them and prioritize them. And sometimes we can actually participate in them.
Okay. Yeah, that's great to know. I remember there was a company I was at and the FBI came in and did a presentation. It was an information security awareness internal conference to the company. And an FBI agent came in and did a talk and even showed us a video about, things that are going on in their world and, overseas. So it was very enlightening.
Yeah, we definitely try to get out and do cyber outreach events like that. And I think you and I met at a hackathon, right? At a local university.
That's right.
So yeah, we'll get a request from a university or, from an organization to come and participate. And then, where it makes sense and where we have the time and the resources, we try to attend those types of events.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's super important for folks to have that interaction with all parts of the cybersecurity sector, including the FBI. So I think that's really, really helpful. I know I've benefited, so that's really good.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Great. So Elvis, any other interesting stories or something funny that you've run across? I'm sure you have a million war stories.
Unfortunately, there are. I mean, there are times when we're just sitting in the squad area, and unfortunately, it's all classified is the issue, right? So all of the stuff that we're working is classified, and I think what we would say is like people would not believe some of the stuff that we've seen or that we've gone through, and they would make the worst movie plot because they would be so unbelievable. I think that's the problem. What I can typically discuss, in this kind of setting is fully adjudicated investigations, and that's what those tend to be a little more cut and dried, unfortunately. But yeah, that is just how it goes.
That's crazy. Well, maybe we'll hear about one day.
Yeah.
That'd be great for another episode.
Yeah, mostly, I think, what do they take? 30 years before they get declassified. So,
wow.
Like the Watergate, that's fully declassified. All of those types of things, unfortunately, it takes 30 years. But there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now. And I wish I could talk about it. But I think, time will tell that we were doing our job in the Bureau.
Yeah, I think it will. Well, we really thank you for your service and appreciate all the things you do, even if we don't hear about them in the news. It's definitely appreciated.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. If you like this show, please share it with your friends and let others know. If you have any questions or comments about getting into Infosec, you can reach me on Twitter at coffeewithAmen. You could also leave a comment on the site or email me at amen@gettingintoinfosec.com. Every week, I let my guests pick their music for the outro. This week, it's Mothership by Paul Mitchell Beebe. See you next time.